Okay, so today I want to talk about very difficult, complex matters which are affecting us right now in ways which we don't properly, but I believe no one, properly understands. I'm really talking about a very old topic in many ways, of body and soul. But I think that those two old partners, body and soul, are trying out a lot of new dances at this very moment. The novel turns of these two, body and soul, may well be creating new personal identities, or at any rate offering new answers to old questions. Who are you? What can you be? Who will you become? And new topics arise. One of these is whether you, especially the younger of you, will be known by your genes or by the company you keep. For the first time in human history, the sciences are starting to tell us about who we are, who we might become, our assorted fates, and our new identities in ways that the sciences have never pretended to tell us before. The faiths have often told us who we are, but the sciences have really not much gone in for that. But not just any science, and certainly not pure science. Biotechnology is the new queen of science and technology, or what some call technoscience. Excellent word. Bits of technoscience seem to be able to tell all about me. We're all interested in the material consequences of biotechnology. You know, will we use stem cells to mitigate the effects of Parkinson's disease, maybe even to cure it or to prevent it in future generations? Will we start cloning ourselves? We can already clone our dogs. I'm interested, and those are interesting questions, which I have nothing to say about. I'm concerned with more subtle matters. What are biotechnologies doing to how we conceive of human beings? And more personally, how will they affect how you feel about literally yourselves and your neighbors and your friends and your children? The old sciences may have affected who we think we humans are, but they said precious little about ourselves as individuals. I think that biotechnology may be changing what I think I am, and it may be doing that to you too, and certainly doing that to my children, and is in the course of doing it even more so to my grandchildren. Only once before in human history has our sense of who we are, one by one, as individuals, been so much under pressure by the sciences. Then it was Freud and psychoanalysis. Many today are what have been called a few years ago Freud bashers, who refuse to dignify psychoanalysis as a science at all. But it sure did change who we are, and even how we dream. Now, of course, if you really let bad science in the door, psychobabble, then our souls are being pushed around all the time. But I personally am a snob about the sciences. Whether Freud is science or poetry, his insights remolded the human psyche with profoundly new ideas. Biology, I think, may be changing it with profoundly new technologies, and I'm afraid I'm a snob. I think the stuff which is on the shelves called self-help in your bookstore are mostly babble. And here I can at least be self-reflective, because the book which I titled Rewriting the Soul was for a long time filed on the self-help shelves of the bookstores in Toronto. And part of my question tonight for us all to think about is whether biology will in some way trump our social selves. In a way, the question I'm asking comes down to whose biology and which society do we choose to identify ourselves in terms of? You're carrying around in your mouth your family tree. You can send a sample of your spit to an internet company, and it will tell you something about your ancestry and the races from which you spring. Genetic anthropology is changing the history of our species and of its movements around the planet over the past 100,000 years. And one wonders whether such advances will end by legitimizing some post-racist idea of races. I think it will. We found out that individuals whose ancestors come from distinct parts of the world have distinct medical problems. If your child has leukemia and needs a bone marrow transplant, and you are also of Southeast Asian descent, you won't look for a donor among white people. You might go to the Triple M organization, Asians for Miracle Marrow Matches. That doesn't show that old racist ideas are sound. But of course, you can count on various racist organizations, the Aryan Nation and its like, to say that modern medicine confirms what racist lore has always hatefully said. When we are on the lookout for new identities, we have to beware of reinforcing old ones that have served us ill. Now, genes get the headlines, but more modest technologies are at work on our identities. We now routinely transfer body parts from cadavers to people with this or that life-threatening problem. Some recipients develop odd relationships to the family of a deceased. A 60-year-old man becomes the surrogate son of a mother whose lad died on a motorbike. The old man calls the 40-year-old woman his mother. Very strange new biosocial formation that identities change. Even more confusing are face grafts. We know our friends in many ways, by their walk, by their touch, and their body language. Walk, you might think, it doesn't matter very much, but I have several times had re-encounters with youths whom I knew as a boy or as a young man 50 years ago. And waiting around outside a cafe, they come up to me and say, "Knew you from a distance, the way you walk." A walk is an extraordinarily good identifier of who a person is. But of course, faces are what we use most. The human body is the best picture of the human soul, as people have been saying from the time of Cicero to the time of Wittgenstein. Surgeons can now take the face of a dead person and graft it on to someone who has been so maliciously deformed by fire she could not otherwise have a comfortable social life in our present world. So who is the person with this truly new face? An old face reused. The surgeons are at work on our own bodies cosmetically to remove wrinkles, and with more medical purpose, to remove fat. Sexuality is as deep in our sense of who we are as anything could be, and a significant few people have operations to change their gender. Some say they got the wrong body, which is now being repaired, so it conforms to their person. In all these operations, the body and its parts are treated as profoundly other. I've got myself, and then I've got this body. It's as if we are starting to regard our bodies as collections of interacting mechanical prostheses. But the sheer practice of organ donation has already changed our notions of life and death. We used to be dead when our heart stopped beating. Now, the best organs from cadavers are extracted while the heart still beats, so long as the brain is dead. More than that, our cheerful sharing of body parts distances ourselves from our bodies. They become other than me, assemblages of flesh, muscle, tissue, and bone. Just when all the deep thinkers are telling us we have finally put the Cartesian split between the mind and body behind us, I begun to wonder if perhaps the I that interests me is something different from the body made up of transferable parts. Mind and body, which we were told had danced the last waltz, are kicking up their distinct heels again. So I tend to focus on the body biological part, large or small, be it a genetic marker or a big body. Not that the two are unconnected. Two new sciences are nutrigenetics, how our genetic constitution affects the response to nutrients, and nutrigenomics, how nutrients affect the expression of our genes. I am not sure which came first, the chicken or the egg, the science or the self-help, but there are numerous print and online media which, after a mail-in DNA reading, will help you avoid your genetic destiny, for a good fee. And I'm just quoting from an online blurb. Zooming in on the body means there are lots of biotechnologies. Of course, we all know about medication. Overactive children are damped down with Ritalin. Deeply depressed individuals are put on a more even keel with Prozac or more recent types of SSRIs. By the time they enter their middle years, most Western adults are imbibing a cocktail of prescription drugs, altering their bodies, their minds, and their personalities. And as men's productive years draw to an end and their sex drive wanes, they take pills. Of course, they've always had ginseng, rhinoceros horn, and bits of shark, but those were long-term tonics. Viagra is almost as specific as a prosthesis intended to preserve a previous personality. What I've done in this talk is merely indicated a whole range of conversation, which I believe it is almost obligatory for us as human beings to have, about how biotechnology and cyber technology are changing our conceptions of what it is to be a human being, what it is to be ourselves, what it is to be a society, and hence it becomes a branch not of reflection in technoscience, but of moral philosophy. And so I end not with any answer, but merely hoping to have aroused, increased an awareness among many of you of the many different ways in which the new technology is changing, making a new me. Thank you.